Jeremy Brown entered this world on October 18, 1994, in Mississippi's heartland, where Southern values run deep and family means everything. Born into a household where hard work wasn't just expected, it was a way of life, Jeremy learned early that character gets built through action, not words. His mother juggled 2 jobs to keep food on the table and bills paid, while his father made sure every evening included time for his children. Whether that meant coaching Little League games, fixing a neighbor's broken fence, or simply listening to how school went that day, Jeremy's dad showed up. This wasn't unusual in their neighborhood, this was just how things worked. People looked out for each other. As the second of 4 children, Jeremy naturally fell into the role of the steady one. While his siblings might argue or create chaos, Jeremy remained calm. He possessed this remarkable ability to diffuse tension without raising his voice or demanding attention. Teachers noticed at first, how other students seemed more relaxed when Jeremy was around, how conflicts seemed to resolve themselves when he was involved. At Jefferson High School, Jeremy carved out a reputation that had nothing to do with being the loudest or most popular. Instead, he became the person everyone could count on. If the local food pantry needed weekend volunteers, Jeremy's name topped the list. His grades reflected his steady approach to everything, solid B's and A's earned through consistent effort rather than last-minute cramming. Jeremy understood that success came from showing up every day and putting in the work, not from looking for shortcuts or easy answers. But what truly set Jeremy apart was his heart. He possessed an uncommon capacity for seeing the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Classmates remember him talking down bullies not through intimidation, but through genuine conversation. He had this gift for making people feel heard and valued, regardless of their social status or background. After graduation, while many of his peers headed off to college or spent months figuring out their next move, Jeremy immediately stepped into adulthood. He understood his family needed financial support, so he took a job as a delivery driver. Every morning at 6 a.m., he was on the road, making sure packages reached their destinations on time. The work wasn't glamorous, but Jeremy approached it with the same dedication he brought to everything else. His supervisors quickly noticed his reliability, never late, never complained, always willing to take on extra routes when someone called in sick. Co-workers respected him because he pulled his own weight and then some. Within a year, Jeremy had added construction work to his schedule. Weekends meant showing up at job sites, learning trades, and earning additional income. His hands grew calloused from handling tools and materials, but his work ethic only grew stronger. Every paycheck went toward helping his mother with household expenses and building a small savings account for the future. Jeremy dreamed of starting his own business someday. He talked about creating something lasting, something he could build from the ground up through honest work. These weren't flashy ambitions, but they were real ones, rooted in his belief that success meant providing for the people you love. Friends described Jeremy during this period as someone who carried himself with quiet confidence. He didn't need to be the center of attention or tell stories about his accomplishments. His reputation spoke for itself through consistent actions and genuine kindness. The young man who emerged from this foundation possessed qualities that seemed rare in someone so young: patience, loyalty, and an understanding that real strength comes from lifting others up rather than putting them down. Jeremy Brown had built himself into exactly the kind of man any community would be proud to call their own. It was 2015 when Jeremy Brown's world changed forever, though he had no way of knowing it at the time. He was working construction, focused on building a stable future, when friends introduced him to Khadijah Michelle Brown at a local gathering. She walked into the room with an energy that demanded attention, confident, outgoing, and completely different from anyone Jeremy had ever met. Where Jeremy was calm and measured, Khadijah was spontaneous and bold. She filled rooms with laughter, told stories that captivated everyone around her, and had this magnetic way of making people feel like they were the most important person in the world when she focused on them. Jeremy, who typically stayed in the background, found himself drawn to her light. Their first conversation lasted hours. Jeremy listened as Khadijah shared her dreams, her passion for life, and her hopes for the future. She was fascinated by his quiet strength, his thoughtful responses, and the way he genuinely cared about what she had to say. By the end of that night, they both knew something special had started. The early months of their relationship were filled with discovery. Jeremy would surprise Khadija with small gestures, her favorite coffee in the morning, flowers just because it was Tuesday, handwritten notes left in her car. Khadija brought adventure into Jeremy's structured world, convincing him to try new restaurants, attend concerts, and take spontaneous weekend trips. They balanced each other perfectly. She pushed him out of his comfort zone, and he provided the stability she craved. Friends and family watched their relationship blossom with joy. Jeremy's mother often commented on how happy her son seemed, noting the way his face lit up whenever Khadija entered a room. Khadija's friends saw a softer side of her emerge, one that felt safe enough to be vulnerable and genuine in ways she never had before. Within 18 months, Jeremy knew he wanted to spend his life with this remarkable woman. He proposed on a quiet evening at their favorite spot by the lake, with no fanfare or grand gestures, just two people who had found their perfect match. Khadija said yes through tears of joy, and they began planning their future together. Their wedding in March 2017 was a celebration of two families becoming one. Jeremy stood at the altar watching Khadija walk down the aisle, overwhelmed by gratitude that this incredible woman had chosen him. The ceremony was intimate, filled with laughter, happy tears, and promises they both meant with every fiber of their being. When their children arrived, Jeremy transformed into the father he had always dreamed of becoming. He would spend hours on the floor playing games, reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character, and teaching them to ride bikes in the driveway. Khadija captured these moments constantly, filling their social media with photos of Jeremy coaching Little League, building blanket forts, and dancing in the kitchen while making Saturday morning pancakes. Their home was filled with warmth and activity. Jeremy worked hard to provide for his growing family, often picking up extra shifts to ensure they never wanted for anything. Khadija managed their household with the same energy she brought to everything else, organizing birthday parties that became neighborhood events and holiday celebrations that their children would remember forever. Evenings found them on the couch after the kids were asleep, making plans for vacations, discussing the children's schooling, and dreaming about the house they would buy someday. Jeremy would often tell friends that marrying Khadija was the best decision he had ever made, and she would beam with pride whenever he introduced her as his wife. Those were golden years, a time when love felt limitless and their future stretched ahead filled with endless possibilities. But like many relationships that start with passion, the very differences that once attracted Jeremy and Khadija to each other slowly began to create friction. What had initially felt like perfect balance, his calm against her energy, gradually shifted into something more complicated. The first signs of trouble weren't dramatic. They were small moments that friends and family later remembered as red flags. Khadija began questioning Jeremy's time away from home. His long work hours, which had once been appreciated as dedication to providing for their growing family, became a source of tension. She accused him of prioritizing work over family, of not being present enough for their 4 children. Jeremy, true to his nature, tried to address her concerns. He adjusted his schedule, took on fewer overtime hours, and made efforts to be more involved in daily household routines. But rather than improving things, his accommodations seemed to fuel more demands. The goalposts kept moving. Friends noticed changes in their dynamic during social gatherings. Where Jeremy had once been relaxed and social, he became more cautious about his words and actions. The arguments began escalating in both frequency and intensity. What started as quiet disagreements behind closed doors became louder confrontations that neighbors could hear through apartment walls. Jeremy's approach never changed. He remained the peacemaker, the one trying to de-escalate, the one seeking compromise. But his patience was being tested in ways he'd never experienced. Khadija's relationship with social media became another point of contention. She had always been active online, sharing photos of their family and celebrating milestones. But her posts began taking on a different tone. She started sharing cryptic messages about relationships, loyalty, and disappointment. Her Instagram stories became filled with quotes about being underappreciated and taken for granted. More concerning was her habit of going live during heated moments. What started as occasional venting sessions to her followers evolved into something more troubling. She would broadcast their personal business, sharing details about their arguments and Jeremy's perceived shortcomings. For Jeremy, a private person who valued keeping family matters within the family, this public airing of their issues was deeply uncomfortable. The pattern became predictable: an argument would start, voices would rise, and suddenly Khadija's phone would come out. Jeremy would find himself not just dealing with the conflict at hand, but also performing for an audience of strangers who were watching their most vulnerable moments unfold in real time. The domestic tension affected the children too. Jeremy became hyper-focused on protecting them from the conflict, often removing them from the apartment when arguments began or taking them to his mother's house for extended visits. He started coaching Little League again, partly because he loved working with kids, but also because it gave him a legitimate reason to be away from home during particularly difficult periods. Khadija's mother became a regular presence in their disputes, often calling during arguments or visiting when tensions were high. Rather than encouraging resolution, her involvement seemed to amplify the conflict. She would validate Khadija's frustrations and encourage her to stand up for herself, adding fuel to an already volatile situation. Despite the growing problems, Jeremy never stopped trying. He suggested counseling, which Khadija rejected. He proposed date nights to reconnect, which often ended in arguments about past grievances. He even considered moving the family to a different apartment, hoping a fresh start might help them reset their relationship. Those closest to Jeremy watched him carry the weight of trying to hold his family together. His natural instinct to fix problems and keep peace was being weaponized against him. Every attempt to address issues was met with new complaints. Every effort to improve was dismissed as inadequate. By early 2023, the cycle had become exhausting. Jeremy was spending more time with his extended family, seeking the kind of calm and stability that had once defined his home life. But he never gave up hope that things could improve, that the woman he loved and the mother of his children would find her way back to the partnership they had once shared. He had no way of knowing that his greatest strength, his unwillingness to give up on the people he loved, was about to lead him into the most dangerous situation of his life. The sun rose on March 25, 2023, like any other Saturday morning in Columbus, Mississippi. Jeremy Brown woke up in the apartment he shared with Khadija and their 4 children, expecting another ordinary weekend. He had no way of knowing that this day would be his last. The trouble started early. Sources close to the family say Khadija woke up in an agitated mood, immediately confronting Jeremy about text messages she claimed to have found on his phone. The alleged evidence of infidelity, screenshots of conversations that were never verified, had been eating at her for days. Jeremy, true to his nature, tried to calm the situation down, explaining that the accusations weren't true. But Khadija wasn't listening. As the morning progressed, the argument intensified. Their 4 children, ranging in age from toddlers to preteens, were stuck in the middle of the chaos. The older kids tried to distract the younger ones, but there was no escaping the tension that filled every corner of their small apartment. Jeremy attempted to defuse the situation multiple times. He suggested they talk later when the kids weren't around. He offered to show her his phone. He even tried to leave the apartment to give everyone space to cool down. But Khadija blocked his path each time, demanding answers to questions he'd already answered. Around noon, Khadija's mother arrived at the apartment. Instead of helping to mediate the situation, she added fuel to the fire. Family members later reported that Khadija's mother had a history of encouraging her daughter's confrontational behavior, and this day was no different. She sat in the living room, validating Khadija's suspicions and pushing her to stand up for herself. "Don't let him disrespect you," she could be heard saying in the background. "You deserve better than this." With her mother's encouragement, Khadija took the argument to social media. Throughout the afternoon, she posted a series of accusations against Jeremy on her Facebook page. She shared screenshots of text messages, claiming they proved his infidelity. She wrote lengthy posts about feeling betrayed and disrespected. Her followers began commenting, some supporting her, others telling her to handle her business privately. Jeremy watched helplessly as their personal problems became public entertainment. He begged Khadija to delete the posts, to think about their children, to consider how this would affect their family. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. As evening approached, Jeremy made another attempt to leave. He gathered some clothes and personal items, telling Khadija he would stay with his brother for a few days until things cooled down. This was Jeremy's way, always trying to be the peacemaker, always believing that space and time could heal any wound. But Khadija saw his departure as abandonment, as proof that her accusations were true. She followed him around the apartment, her voice growing louder with each step. The children huddled together in one of the bedrooms, trying to block out the noise. Then, around 7:30 in the evening, Khadija made a decision that would change everything. She opened her Facebook app and clicked Go Live. The red recording button lit up, and suddenly dozens of people could see and hear everything happening in their apartment. Khadija held the phone close to her face, explaining to her audience that she was tired of being played for a fool. She accused Jeremy of cheating again, this time to hundreds of strangers. Jeremy, still holding his bag of clothes, could be heard in the background trying to reason with her. "I'm not trying to argue," he said, his voice calm but strained. "I just want to leave. I'm trying to get ready for work tomorrow." But Khadija wasn't having it. She followed him with the phone, continuing her accusations. "You don't do nothing for these kids," she yelled. "You don't do nothing around here." Jeremy's response was measured and tired. "I do what I can when I can," he said. "But don't keep putting me in situations that aren't my problem." The viewers watching the live stream could sense the tension escalating. Some typed comments trying to calm Khadija down. Others encouraged the drama. Most watched in uncomfortable silence as a private family dispute played out in real time. Jeremy continued trying to leave, but Khadija physically blocked his path. "Keep your hands off me," Jeremy said repeatedly, his voice showing the first signs of frustration. "Don't touch me." The children's voices could be heard crying in the background. Khadija's mother chimed in from the living room, continuing to encourage her daughter's behavior. For several minutes, the argument continued this way, Jeremy trying to leave, Khadija blocking him, the children crying, and hundreds of strangers watching it all unfold. Then, at 7:42 p.m., the sound that would haunt everyone who heard it echoed through the phone speakers. A single gunshot. The screen went black.
Oh man, that's what I'm finna do, huh? I'm finna get out. I ain't really trying to argue anyway. I'm just trying to get out.
No, you want to go tell your family about this, about that. You want to do this.
I ain't trying to argue at all.
Ain't nobody. I'm going to take my car key off. What is the conversation? No, what's the conversation? What's the conversation?
Keep hands on.
What's the conversation?
Keep hands on. Don't touch me, bro.
What's the conversation?
Move, bro. I'm trying to get ready for work, man. Go.
How you getting ready for work?
What is going on? That's all I'm here. I'm over here doing. Talking about I don't do nothing for the kids. I don't do this. I do what I can when I can.
understand.
But like I said, don't keep putting me in situations that's not my problem. And then, like I said, this is your family. You supposed to be here. You have been taking care of these kids. No, you're not good because you're not here taking care of these kids.
He wanna go call everybody.
Keep your hands on me, bro. Don't touch me again.
Touch you.
Touch it. Sit there, don't care. We'll make it easy. Sit there.
Ain't nobody been come over here and do nothing.
Get your hands on me, bro. Stop touching me. Move.
You need to stop.
Sit there, don't care.
The silence that followed the gunshot on the Facebook live stream lasted only seconds before chaos erupted. While viewers frantically called 911 from their phones across the country, the children inside that Columbus apartment were screaming. Khadija's voice could be heard shouting, "I didn't want to go to jail," as the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. At exactly 7:42 a.m., multiple patrol cars from the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department converged on the Green Tree Apartments. Deputies had received several emergency calls reporting a possible shooting that had been broadcast live on social media. The first responders had no idea what they were walking into, but they knew time was critical. When officers reached the apartment door, they could hear crying from inside. The door was unlocked. What they found when they entered would stay with them for the rest of their careers. Jeremy Brown lay motionless on the living room floor. Blood pooled beneath his body where the single bullet had torn through his back and damaged vital organs. His 4 children, ranging in ages from toddlers to preteens, were huddled together in obvious shock and terror. Khadija sat nearby, her phone still recording, though the Facebook Live had ended minutes earlier. The responding officers immediately secured the scene and called for paramedics, though it was clear Jeremy was beyond help. One deputy stayed with the traumatized children while others began documenting everything they saw. The 9mm handgun that had ended Jeremy's life was found exactly where Khadija had dropped it after the shooting. Detective Mike Johnson was the lead investigator who took charge of processing the scene. He'd handled domestic violence cases before, but this one was different. The entire incident had been recorded and broadcast to dozens of witnesses online. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Khadija didn't resist when officers placed her in handcuffs. She appeared dazed, repeatedly asking about her children and muttering that she didn't know it was loaded. When questioned at the scene, she admitted to grabbing the gun during their argument. Her story was simple: Jeremy had been trying to leave, she was angry about his alleged infidelity, and she picked up the weapon to intimidate him. But the physical evidence told a different story. Jeremy had been shot in the back while moving away from her. There were no defensive wounds on his body, no signs that he had threatened her or tried to take the gun. The trajectory of the bullet and the position of his body made it clear he had been trying to exit the apartment when Khadija pulled the trigger. Child Protective Services was called to handle the immediate welfare of the 4 children, who would need emergency placement while their mother faced charges. Family members arrived at the scene within the hour, devastated by the news and struggling to comprehend how their loved one was gone. By 9:30 a.m., less than 2 hours after the shooting, Khadija Michelle Brown was officially arrested and charged with murder. The weapon was bagged as evidence, along with her cell phone that contained the Facebook Live video. Forensic specialists photographed every angle of the crime scene while neighbors gathered outside, many of them having watched the tragedy unfold online in real time. The investigation was essentially complete before it even began. The killer had confessed, the weapon was recovered, and the entire crime had been documented on video for the world to see. The wheels of justice began turning immediately after Khadija's arrest. Within 48 hours, the Lowndes County District Attorney's Office filed formal charges against her. The charge was severe, first-degree murder. This wasn't manslaughter or a heat-of-the-moment crime in the eyes of the law. Prosecutors believed Khadija had committed an intentional, premeditated act of taking another person's life. The evidence was overwhelming. They had the Facebook Live video, witness testimonies from viewers who watched the stream, the recovered weapon, and Khadija's own admissions at the scene. But perhaps most damning was the forensic evidence showing Jeremy had been shot in the back while trying to leave. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of a physical struggle, and no indication that Jeremy posed any threat to justify lethal force. Khadija's first court appearance came 3 weeks after the shooting. She walked into the Lowndes County Courthouse wearing a standard orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled, looking nothing like the animated woman who had argued on social media just weeks before. The courtroom was packed with media, Jeremy's family members, and curious onlookers who had followed the case. Her defense attorney, appointed by the court, faced an almost impossible task. How do you defend someone when the crime was broadcast live to dozens of witnesses? The strategy became clear during preliminary hearings: they would try to reduce the charges. The defense argued that Khadija was emotionally overwhelmed, that she hadn't planned to hurt Jeremy, and that the shooting was a tragic result of escalating domestic tensions rather than premeditated murder. But the prosecution pushed back hard. They presented evidence of the couple's history of domestic disputes, emphasizing that Jeremy had repeatedly tried to de-escalate conflicts. They showed text messages where Jeremy had expressed concern about Khadija's increasingly aggressive behavior. Most importantly, they played portions of the Facebook Live video in court, demonstrating that Jeremy was attempting to leave when he was shot. The case took an unexpected turn in May 2024, over a year after Jeremy's death. Faced with the mountain of evidence against her, Khadijah made a decision that surprised many observers. She agreed to a plea deal. Standing before Judge Patricia Wilson, Khadijah formally pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The plea agreement meant she would avoid a potential life sentence that could have come with a first-degree murder conviction, but it still carried serious consequences. Judge Wilson, a 15-year veteran of the bench known for her thoughtful sentencing, took her time reviewing the case details before announcing the punishment. The courtroom fell silent as she prepared to speak. "Mrs. Brown," Judge Wilson began, her voice firm but measured, "you have taken the life of a young man who by all accounts was trying to be a good father and partner. You made a choice in a moment of anger that cannot be undone. While I recognize that domestic relationships can be complicated and emotionally charged, there is no justification for what you did." The sentence was harsh but not unexpected, 40 years in prison. Under Mississippi law, Khadijah would have to serve at least 25 years before becoming eligible for parole. At 28 years old, she would be in her 50s before even having the possibility of freedom. Judge Wilson continued, "The fact that this was broadcast live, with children present, makes this case particularly disturbing. Your actions have traumatized not only your own children but also the many people who witnessed this tragedy online." Khadijah showed little emotion as the sentence was read. She simply nodded when asked if she understood the terms. Her family members, present in the courtroom, wept quietly. Jeremy's family sat stoically, finally having the legal closure they had waited over a year to receive. The gavel came down, and Khadijah Michelle Brown became inmate number 89432 in the Mississippi Department of Corrections system. After Khadijah received her 40-year sentence, the focus shifted to honoring the man who had been taken too soon. Jeremy's funeral became a testament to the life he had lived and the hearts he had touched. The service was held at First Baptist Church in Columbus, Mississippi, just blocks from where Jeremy had grown up. By 9 in the morning, every pew was filled. Families who had known Jeremy since childhood sat alongside co-workers who had only known him for months. The parking lot overflowed as people continued to arrive, many choosing to stand along the walls rather than miss the chance to pay their respects. Jeremy's casket was surrounded by white lilies and golden roses, his favorite colors according to his mother. Photos displayed throughout the sanctuary showed different chapters of his life: the shy teenager volunteering at the food pantry, the proud father at his children's school events, the devoted son helping his mother with groceries. Each image told the story of a man who had consistently chosen kindness over conflict. His mother, supported by Jeremy's siblings, spoke through tears about the son who had always been her anchor. The weight of loss was felt most heavily by Jeremy's 4 children, who sat in the front row clinging to relatives. Friends established a fund for their education, knowing that Jeremy's greatest pride had always been his role as their father. Within weeks, the community had raised enough to secure their college futures, a gesture Jeremy would have been overwhelmed by. Local business owners where Jeremy had worked shared stories of his reliability and genuine care for others. One supervisor remembered how Jeremy had volunteered to work extra shifts during the holidays so colleagues with young children could spend time with their families. Another spoke of Jeremy's habit of checking on elderly customers, sometimes helping them rearrange furniture long after his delivery duties were complete. The church overflowed with testimonies of small acts of generosity that had defined Jeremy's character. A neighbor recalled how he had quietly mowed her lawn for months after her husband passed away. A coworker shared how Jeremy had given him rides to work for weeks when his car broke down, never accepting gas money in return. As the service concluded, Jeremy's youngest brother stood to address the gathering. "My brother believed that how you treat people when nobody's watching shows who you really are," he said. Jeremy lived that every single day. He made all of us want to be better people just by watching how he moved through the world. The congregation filed out slowly, many stopping to embrace Jeremy's family members and share one final memory of a man whose legacy would live on through the countless lives he had touched with his quiet strength and unwavering compassion. Jeremy Brown's story reveals uncomfortable truths about the world we live in today. When personal conflicts become public spectacles, the consequences reach far beyond the people involved. This case shows us how quickly domestic disputes can escalate when there's no intervention, no cooling-off period, and no outside help. The most disturbing aspect isn't just the violence, it's how social media transformed a private tragedy into public entertainment. Dozens of people watched this unfold in real time, turning a family's worst moment into content. We must ask ourselves, what responsibility do we have when we witness these situations online? Warning signs of domestic violence often hide in plain sight. Constant arguments, attempts to control, and public humiliation through social media are red flags that demand attention. Jeremy tried to walk away, tried to keep the peace, but sometimes leaving isn't enough without proper support systems. If this case resonates with you, share this video to spread awareness about domestic violence prevention. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who need to hear them. Remember, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 for help. Most importantly, if you recognize these patterns in your own life or someone else's, reach out. Jeremy's children lost their father in a tragedy that could have been prevented. Don't let another family suffer the same fate.